need your car, man. Whoa!
The film opens with an old woman covered in blood in the forest and trying to cut the zip tie, tying her wrists. Sometimes she dissociates and repeats the words, "murder maker," while a black dog watches from afar. When the zip tie finally breaks, she hears snarling and runs away. On a farm nearby, Maggie and her son Arlo capture a wasp in a teacup, and Maggie says they now have a storm in a cup. In the kitchen, Maggie's mother-in-law, Ellen, hears the radio make a screeching noise for a second before the music returns to normal.
I'm gonna go outside, let him go. You wanna come?
No way.
Then Maggie takes the teacup outside, and her husband James mentions that the goats have been spooked by something. He also says they should talk about what's happening, but Maggie says she isn't ready. After releasing the wasp outside Arlo's window, Maggie heads to the stables, where the horses are all freaking out. Meanwhile, Arlo sees a goat escaping into the woods and goes after it, while the old woman watches him from behind the trees. In the evening, Maggie looks for Arlo but can't find him. Nobody has seen him, but they assume he's hiding, which he often does. At that moment, their neighbor Reuben and his family arrived with their horse, which had been panicking and injured its head. Since Maggie is a veterinarian, she agrees to take the horse to her clinic with Reuben while the others search for Arlo.
Arlo?
Arlo!
Ellen heard the screeching noise on the radio again. Reuben's son, Nicholas, mentioned that he had also heard it earlier. At the same time, Arlo's sister, Meryl, notices that a goat is missing. Reuben's wife, Valeria, also shared that another neighbor was missing a dog. At the clinic, Maggie discovered a large splinter lodged in the horse's body, but thankfully it hadn't cut through any blood vessels. Meanwhile, in the forest, Arlo was still following the goat when the old woman suddenly appeared behind him, mumbling strange words in both English and Spanish. Soon after, the families entered the woods to look for Arlo. Meryl and Nicholas heard a noise and noticed a shadow among the trees. Nearby, James and Valeria were also searching while discussing their past affair, of which Maggie was unaware. They were interrupted by the teens, who had found both the missing dog and the goat. More snarling noises are coming from the trees, and they see some animals running by. James tells everyone to return to the house, suspecting it might be a coyote. Meanwhile, Arlo is unconscious somewhere else in the forest, with strange marks on his body. When he wakes up, he finds the old woman roaring in his face. A rainbow light appears in her eyes, and Arlo's eyes mimic it.
Hey, did you find him?
No, but I will.
The families return to the house just as Donald and his wife Claire arrive to pick up their dog. Donald explains that the animal in the woods wasn't a coyote, but a large dog, likely a mutt. He then takes out his gun, announcing that he wants to hunt down the beast. James disapproves of this idea, but their argument is interrupted when Arlo finally returns.
Arlo!
After mumbling the exact nonsensical words as the old woman, he collapses. In the woods, she is now lucid and begging for help, but unfortunately, the beast finds her and kills her. Meanwhile, a person in a gas mask is spraying a line of blue paint around the farm. Back with the families, they notice the lights in the house flickering, and the dog won't stop barking in the woods. They want to take Arlo to the hospital, but none of their cars are working and their phones do not signal. As everyone enters the house, Donald points out that someone must have hurt Arlo, so he decides to look for that person before they escape. In the bathroom, Arlo starts feeling better and can talk usually. His wounds are minor, and he doesn't remember what happened. Suddenly, he insists that they must leave and starts repeating the strange words again, including murder maker. Then he tries to run away and accidentally bumps into Nicholas, causing him to hurt his head. Maggie chases after Arlo and holds him down until he passes out again. Meanwhile, James and Reuben are getting two horses ready to go to town for help when they notice a car on the road with its lights on. They run toward it and encounter the masked man, who gestures for them to freeze before pointing at the blue line on the ground. He holds his position and does not cross the line. James tries to explain the situation and asks for help, only for the man to pull out a gun to keep them at bay. He draws a new diagram on the board that depicts a blue line as a circle encompassing the area. When James tries to approach him again, the man fires a warning shot. Meanwhile, Arlo suddenly grabs a pair of scissors and attempts to attack Maggie in the house while repeating strange words. She quickly runs to block the door, trying to prevent him from leaving again. After a struggle, she disarms him and holds him tightly until he returns to his usual self. Feeling scared, Arlo confesses to Maggie, who then comforts him by singing as he places a bunch of marbles on the floor with an inverted teacup on top. After pointing to the word trap in a dictionary, Arlo tells Maggie that a voice in his head is instructing them to hide because something is coming, and it destroys everything in its path. Meanwhile, Donald continues his search in the woods, but suddenly trips over something. It turns out to be the old woman's body, Carmen. In the process, he drops his gun. When he turns around to look for it, he finds a large black dog growling menacingly at him. Donald slowly starts to back away, but the dog chases after him regardless. They reach where his friends and the masked man are standing, and Donald goes through the fence to escape. Unfortunately, he falls, and the dog jumps on him to attack. A fight ensues, and Donald throws the dog off, making him fall across the line. All the men watch in shock how the dog's bones start coming out of his body until he dies. James demands an explanation, but the masked man only writes that he doesn't trust anyone and leaves in his car. At the house, Claire announces she's going home with her dog because she has a landline phone that should work. The men are on their way back and see her come out, so they try to warn her, but it's too late. As the dog runs away from the line in fear, Claire crosses it, and her bones snap out, killing her in seconds. Donald tries to reach his wife, but his hand starts losing skin, so the other guys must pull him back. The next morning, Donald is still sitting outside, staring at his wife's body. In the house, Maggie asks Meryl to watch Arlo, and then she talks to James about their situation. James wants to cross the woods to check on their neighbors, the Navarros, but Maggie insists he should take Ruben. James refuses, prompting Maggie to confront him about his affair with Valeria, which Ruben overhears. James admits the affair was true, but insists that it's over and that he loves Maggie. He apologizes, but his words don't suffice. After that, Ruben decides not to share what he knows and gives Maggie a gun before joining James for the trip. They set off on their horses and just a few minutes into the ride encounter a snake that has crossed their path, its bones protruding horrifically. Meanwhile, Ellen and Valeria cover Claire's body with a blanket as Maggie takes Donald into the house. She tends to his injury and administers an injection of animal medicine. Donald reveals to Maggie that there is a body in the woods. Upstairs, Meryl and Nicholas find Arlo learning words from a dictionary. When Nicholas asks Arlo who he is, Arlo replies that he is the Harbinger. At the same time, the honest Arlo is asleep and resting. The Harbinger insists they are trapped and grabs Meryl's hand, urging her to hide or they will die. In the struggle, Meryl falls and accidentally spills a glass of water over a rainbow drawing. The colors spread, inspiring the Harbinger.
Not trapped.
Arlo?
He tells Meryl they aren't truly trapped and tries to pull her with him, but she resists. Arlo then wakes up and tells Meryl that she must listen to the Harbinger because an assassin is coming. After a lot of pleading from Arlo, Meryl and Nicholas agree to follow him into the woods, though Nicholas brings a knife just in case. Arlo transforms into the Harbinger and leads them to a spot where the ground is burnt and dead animals are scattered around. He claims the area is his and points to the sky, explaining where he came from. He then shows them a jar containing a rainbow-colored liquid he collected from a rock, saying it is poison while insisting that they should drink it. If they drink just enough, they'll be able to walk over the line. If they drink too much, they'll die. And if they don't drink, the assassin will kill them. Meryl announces they're going home, and on their way back, Nicholas admits he's loved her since second grade. Feeling awkward, Meryl changed the subject by asking the Harbinger to bring Arlo out. She then asks her brother about the entity's motives, and he says the Harbinger is on a secret mission. Before she can ask more, they hear a car and run away. Outside the house, Ellen and Valeria are chatting. Ellen reveals she knows about the affair, so Valeria admits she's unsatisfied with the farmer's life with Ruben. They see a van stop nearby at that moment, and Lieutenant Olson emerges. Ignoring the women's warnings, he crosses the line and says, "This is the easy part, but leaving it's the problem."
Coming over this side's a piece of cake. Heading back the other way, that's the problem.
Back to Ruben and James, they reach Navarro's house and split to search the area. Ruben sees the dogs staring at the silo door and scares them off before going through that door. James discovers the dead bodies of his neighbors in a pool of water before entering the house, where he finds another body. Suddenly, he hears a noise coming from the basement. As he steps down the stairs, someone grabs and pulls him down. Meanwhile, Maggie heads into the forest to search for the body Donald mentioned and recognizes the woman as Carmen Navarro.
What happened to you?
Back at the house, Olson tells Ellen and Valeria that he understands what's happening and is there to help. Just then, Maggie arrives and shares what she saw. Olson explains that his mission was to find and isolate Carmen. He then asks if anyone has had contact with her while she was alive. And when he hears about Arlo, he requests to see him.
You know where Arlo is right now?
As Maggie takes him upstairs, Olsen reveals that he is a policeman and part of a large task force that includes police, military, and Marines. They know some disturbances outside their usual parameters, but have determined that complex organisms like animals and humans cannot survive in those conditions. She grows suspicious and questions whether his task force is responsible for Carmen's death. Still, he insists he just arrived on the scene. She doesn't believe him because she saw restraint marks on Carmen's wrists. Olsen admits he lied and insists the only way to survive is to take him to her son. When she refuses, he tries to attack her, but Maggie quickly knocks him out with her gun. After that, the women tie him up in the barn. While searching through his belongings, Maggie finds a zip tie, which makes her suspect he's lying about his identity. As they discuss dishonesty, Valeria realizes that Maggie knows about the affair and vows it's over. Just then, he wakes up and asks for Arlo, claiming they're running out of time. Frustrated, Maggie storms out, and Olsen tries to manipulate Valeria into thinking he's there to help. Their conversation is interrupted by Ellen, who can't find the kids. Valeria decides to search for them, leaving Ellen to guard Olsen with a gun. Meanwhile, Maggie rushes to her clinic and has a panic attack. Donald steps in to share comforting words and helps her calm down. In the woods, the kids encounter a different masked man holding a sign that warns them not to cross the line. When he sees the jar, he tells them to hand it over, but the kids refuse. The man then fights Nicholas, and after some struggle, Nicholas stabs him while the jar falls and breaks. Meryl rushes to cover the guy's wound. She removes his mask, causing him to recognize the Harbinger as the being in Carmen. The man says his name is McNabb and swears he's here to help the Harbinger.
You were that woman.
Yes.
In the barn, Olsen convinces Ellen to wipe the blood from his eye. When she comes closer, he opens his mouth wide and transfers the entity to Ellen. Now possessed, Ellen shoots Olsen dead. Then he frees him and gets a wound on her forehead to make it look like Olsen attacked her. At the Navarros' estate, the dogs are barking at the silo door again. Inside, Ruben has found a tree covered in rainbow lights. At first, he tries to ignore it, but eventually he gives in and reaches out to touch it. Before he can do so, a spider lands on his hand and the light kills it immediately. Outside, the dogs have settled down. In the basement, James wakes up to find his hands tied. Nearby, a boy named Travis removes his mask to smoke. He can barely walk because of his injuries, but he manages to grab his gun and asks James for a good reason not to shoot him. James tells Travis about Arlo in the line. Still, Travis explains it's impossible to determine who is an actual human and alien. He then shares his own story. Travis used to work as a bartender at a bar where McNabb was drinking. In his drunken state, McNabb rambled on about visitors from space and an invisible death trap. When the other patrons laughed at him, McNabb revealed a scar on his arm as proof of his claims. As McNabb grew more aggressive, the bar owner asked Travis to drive him home. During the ride, McNabb spoke about the death trap, describing an incandescent power source that lured people in. After dropping McNabb off, Travis stayed outside to have a cigarette and noticed some signs with ominous messages nearby. Suddenly, an orange car stopped briefly before speeding away. He then heard strange noises coming from the house, prompting him to go inside to investigate. Travis discovered a collection of masks on the table while McNabb was sleeping nearby. He opened a drawer and stole a knife before McNabb woke up and pointed his gun at him. McNabb quickly lowered the weapon, saying he could tell Travis genuinely believed him. After that, Travis began spending time with McNabb to learn more about these visitors who arrived on Earth in meteors and took over human bodies. Some visitors were benevolent, while others were evil. If a good visitor appeared first, a bad one would follow to track it down. Soon, Olsen joined them and taught Travis how to shoot a gun. To help him learn, they used their own pictures as targets, preparing Travis for the possibility of having to kill a friend if they became possessed. Olsen revealed that he used to be a police officer, but had left that profession behind. The men explained that shooting would kill the host, not the alien controlling it. They suspected that a bad visitor had possessed a woman named Mary. Two of their friends had been monitoring her for 2 years. They had observed no changes in her routine until 2 weeks ago when she became unusually active. She purchased a gun, zip ties, and other equipment, which probably indicated she was preparing for the arrival of a good visitor. That night, Travis was still uncertain about the entire visitor situation. McNabb told him about his daughter, possessed by a good visitor 10 years ago. Sometime later, a bad visitor came and took her from him and forced her to consume a substance known as rainbow liquid, making her cross a crucial line. When McNabb tried to follow them, he injured his arm at that same line. Eventually, the trap vanished, along with the visitors, leaving his daughter's lifeless body in a dumpster. McNabb then gave Travis a sample of the rainbow liquid, which Travis wore on a necklace around his neck. Later, while keeping watch, Travis spotted an orange car. However, Olsen clarified that it wasn't Mary. It was a former team member whom Travis was replacing. After the vehicle left, Mary arrived in her van and released a black dog into the forest. The group followed the van to Navarro's house, quickly identifying Carmen as a good visitor. Mary entered the house with the family, so the men wore masks to follow them. McNabb put a sign at the window and told Travis to prepare the pool. Olsen and McNabb burst into the house and Travis could hear a fight while he took a kiddie pool from the car and filled it with water. He also left a note with instructions on how to renew a drowning victim. At that moment, a man came out of the house with the dogs and Mary shot him. After killing the other Navarro family members inside the house, Mary went to the empty silo and poured rainbow liquid on the ground. McNabb came out of the house with Carmen, whose wrists had been tied up. Unfortunately, he lost his grip, and Carmen ran into the woods. The liquid in the silo started to grow into a tree, and McNabb realized Mary was setting up the trap, so he rushed to his car and left without his friends. Travis tried calling McNabb's phone, but he could only hear a screeching sound that hurt his ear. Mary heard him and came over to transfer the visitor to him. A possessed Travis grabbed a piece of wood to hit her head, and Mary responded by shooting him twice. After a few seconds, she was dead, and Travis was throwing up blood. At that moment, Olsen came out and tried to help Travis, but only for the visitor to jump into his body. A terrified Travis ran into the house and stayed in the basement since then. In the present, Travis finishes his story and explains that the only person who can stop the trap is the visitor who made it. He also says that he doesn't want to die alone, but James convinces him to release him. After throwing his knife at James, Travis decides to self-delete.
No!
In the silo, the tree blocks the door to stop Ruben from leaving. James comes looking for him and shoots his gun to scare the dogs away. Ruben yells back to reveal his location, and James opens the silo door only for the tree to close it again. A desperate James grabs an axe and makes a hole in the wall to pull his friend out, only for Ruben to tackle him and punch him a few times for the affair. James apologizes and reminds him that they must set this issue aside for later. The duo mounts their horses and rides into the forest where they find the kids with McNabb. Back at the house, Maggie tends to Ellen's injury, unaware she is trying to transfer the visitor to her. However, they are interrupted by Valeria, who announces the return of their families. Merrill assists Maggie in treating McNabb, while Arlo insists he's one of the good ones. Donald informs James about everything concerning Olsen as they examine the body's position. With their knowledge of Travis's story, they realize that the negative visitor is now inhabiting Ellen. Meanwhile, Nicholas shares everything with his parents, and Ruben requests to be taken to McNabb's car. As the family walks through the woods, Ruben confesses that he knows about the affair. Valeria cries and apologizes, swearing that it's over. Their argument is interrupted by Nicholas, who discovers a broken jar containing a rainbow-colored liquid. Ruben becomes entranced by it and doesn't snap out until a wolf appears and growls at them. The family steps back as the wolf approaches the jar to drink the liquid. In response, Nicholas, advised by his dad, fires a warning shot to scare the wolf away. The wolf runs off and crosses the line without getting hurt. Nearby, Nicholas discovers McNabb's diary. In the house, Arlo tells Maggie and Merrill that the Harbinger's mission is to find a machine without waking more assassins, the malevolent visitors hiding inside many people. Once he sees the machine, he can activate it to prepare for what's coming. At that moment, McNabb wakes up and warns that the visitors are preparing for an invasion. He pulls out his gun, which Donald sees, prompting him to run and warn James. McNabb says he can't trust anyone and wants to take Arlo to safety. James enters and begins to argue with McNabb, who loses control and opens fire just as Donald walks into the room. Donald gets shot, but fortunately, he is wearing a bulletproof vest under his jacket. James tackles McNabb, but McNabb quickly throws him off and escapes. James tries to pursue him, but McNabb is already gone. Meanwhile, Maggie checks on Donald, who is all right, thanks to his protective gear. Afterwards, everyone begins to search for Ellen, but they can't find her. By nighttime, James tells his family to stay in the house while he and Donald search the forest. Just then, Ruben's family returns, and James updates them on the situation. Nicholas is sent inside while Ruben and Valeria join the search. Inside the house, Maggie hears strange noises and goes downstairs to investigate, but finds nothing. Meanwhile, Ruben searches the garage, and Valeria waits outside, unaware someone is walking behind her. James searches through Maggie's clinic and hears noises as well. When he opens a door, he is startled by Donald's dog. Donald hears the horses panicking in the stables and searches every corner until he finds a confused Ellen. They all gather in the living room, where Ellen states she believes the visitor has left her, meaning it has entered someone else. An argument breaks out about how to proceed, and Nicholas reveals what he discovered in McNabb's diary. An assassin can be removed from its host if the human drowns. McNabb is ready to take action in the morning, but recalls that James mentioned Travis. He rushes to Navarro's house and takes the necklace with the liquid from Travis's body. Meanwhile, Maggie reads Travis's instruction sheet, which James brought from the Navarro's house. She leaves her room and finds Valeria preparing breakfast for the kids, who are being protected by Nicholas. Outside, there's a lot of tension among the men as they manage to get a fire going, hoping the smoke will attract help. Ruben, tired of waiting, walks off, followed by Donald. Then Maggie approaches James with the instructions and admits she can't bring herself to drown anyone. James counters that it is their only solution, leading to another argument. In the kitchen, Valeria attempts to create a map and a list of people alone with Ellen and starts formulating ideas. Upstairs, Nicholas continues reading McNabb's diary with Meryl and discovers an underground resistance fighting against the visitors. Nicholas and Meryl share a kiss while reading about the visitor moving from one host to another. At the same time, Donald follows Ruben at Navarro's house, where Ruben is dousing the silo with fuel to set it on fire. The flames consume the building at an alarming rate, leaving only a few remnants of wood after the fire is extinguished. Suddenly, McNabb arrives and informs them that they can try something else. He shows them Travis's necklace. Meanwhile, Meryl checks on Arlo inside the house and finds him repeatedly drawing a zigzag line. She realizes that Arlo is attempting to draw a map. After examining numerous maps in a book, Meryl finally discovers that Arlo's drawing corresponds to Belknap Mountain. At the same time, Valeria pulls Nicholas out of the house, claiming she knows the assassin's identity. She takes him to the edge of the blue line and gives him the sedative and the knife she had found in Ellen's room. It turns out that the bad visitor is in her body because she opens her mouth and transfers the visitor to Nicholas, who pushes her across the line, watching her die. Back at the Navarro house, Ruben drinks Travis's necklace's rainbow liquid. Now he can approach the tree without being bewitched. Although he's wearing gloves, grabbing a branch still burns him painfully. Ruben perseveres and breaks the branch, then returns to his friends to place it in a jar, where it immediately turns into liquid. Meanwhile, Maggie and James are discussing the drowning issue again, pondering how to revive a person through CPR if the visitor travels through the mouth. James then brings up Travis and expresses his guilt over being unable to save him. He and Maggie bond over their fears and hold hands, hoping to repair their relationship. In Arlo's room, he and Meryl brainstorm ways to find the assassin. Arlo comes up with an idea by covering only one marble with a teacup. Just then, something hits the window, and Meryl sees Nicholas telling her to come outside. Meryl runs to him, and Nicholas reveals that his mother is the assassin, showing her the knife and proof. He pretends that Valeria failed the transfer, and when Meryl lets her guard down, Nicholas transfers the assassin to her. Then Mary knocks Nicholas out with a rock and goes back inside. All this is seen by Arlo at the window, who runs to warn his parents. When Meryl enters the house, Maggie points a gun at her. The girl is under the control of the assassin, who threatens to kill the host's body until Maggie puts down her weapon. She then tries to leave, only to be jumped on and captured by a masked James. While Maggie also puts her mask on and prepares the tub, Meryl fights her father to try to unmask him, but she's unsuccessful. Then the couple grabs her together and submerges her in the filled tub. They do their best to keep her underwater, but Meryl never stops fighting and even removes James's mask. Eventually, Meryl drowns, and her parents immediately take her out. Maggie starts using CPR and cries when nothing happens, thinking she lost her daughter. However, after a few minutes, Meryl wakes up and confirms she isn't possessed. Unfortunately, James struggles with himself and tells Meryl and Maggie to run. Outside, the men return and hide in the stables with the others. Arlo notices a jar with a mysterious liquid and insists that they must leave immediately. Ruben instructs everyone to go while he waits for James and his family. As the group makes their exit, they come across Valeria's body, leading Nicholas to have a breakdown. Amid this chaos, Arlo hears a strange sound and runs away from the group. Once the assassin takes control of James, he searches for victims. Ruben confronts him in an attempt to fight, but James easily overpowers him and slams his head into the ground. Just then, Maggie fires a warning shot right before Arlo calls out his dad. James follows Arlo's voice, and Maggie readies her shot but cannot pull the trigger. James then enters the stables and heads upstairs. Meanwhile, Arlo keeps him distracted while Maggie injects James with a sedative. After that, she drags Arlo downstairs to escape, but he reminds her about the wasp in the teacup. Soon, James comes downstairs as well and tries to transfer the visitor to Maggie, prompting her to stab him in the leg to make him back off. James quickly recovers and launches another attack, but Maggie is prepared. She quickly pushes him into a large freezer. He struggles to prevent her from closing the lid, and Maggie loses her strength. Ruben arrives and adds heavy objects to the freezer to keep it shut. Meryl, hearing her father's screams, is determined to free him, but Maggie has to pull her away. Eventually, the screams fade, signaling that James is dead and the alien is now trapped. After this shocking incident, everyone drinks rainbow liquid and safely walks over a blue line without harm. However, Ellen decides to stay behind to care for the animals, hoping that Maggie and the others will return with a solution. After an emotional farewell, the group departs in Olsen's van. A short while later, they encounter a roadblock created by two friendly resistance group members who claim to be friends, and McNabb also knows them. Suddenly, an orange car appears and runs over the duo, instantly killing them both. The driver is McNabb's former partner, whom Travis replaced. Alongside him is a woman who explains that the duo they just killed had been manipulated by evil visitors. The driver demonstrates this by opening their bags, revealing zip ties, sedatives, and a jar filled with a colorful liquid. The woman then informs them that the visitors are awakening worldwide and urges them to join the fight. Maggie insists that they will only go somewhere once they receive an explanation of what is happening.